It's an honor to be here. Very excited. And I'm here to tell you that the decentralization will be televised. And before I start, I just want to mention that we've been talking a lot about decentralization in the framework of the blockchain. Obviously, the blockchain is incredibly exciting. But it's not just a socioeconomic movement. It's really a political and a cultural one as well. And today I'll be discussing with you the decentralization of culture. So here's a brief outline of what I'll be discussing. And so, you guys know this. In your pockets, we have an incredibly powerful array of technology that allows us to create incredible video. And with consumer products, we can edit these videos into works of art. And the real problem is getting it to your audience. So we have traditional social media websites that are really fantastic at hitting your audience if you have it already. It's very narrow band casting. It's not broadcasting though. So it's my intention to tell you that there's a better way out there. So I'm going to start with what is. And the problem with the broadcast industry is that it's heavily dominated by a handful of very old legacy broadcast systems. And they really dictate a high level of what I would consider a narrative, a cultural narrative, that we're expected to have opinions on and that we're expected to act on. So, we have a national top 40. This is a very American perspective, but I'm fairly confident it's like this in most countries. And we have, we're expected to dress a certain way, act a certain way, listen to a certain music, discuss a certain political point. And it's very much a top-down driven process. And so even though we have these great products that allow us to express ourselves, at the end of the day, culture is still somewhat commoditized. And it's a problem. So before I can describe what the problem is, I kind of want to discuss what culture is. And I like to think of it as the contextual environment that influences how you think, behave, and feel. And it's incredibly powerful. I have a public health background. And what I learned in school and what I did in my own research is that the way you perceive yourself, your identity, the way you behave is very much influenced by your context, the environment you're in. And it goes from something like if you hang out with people who are overweight, you become overweight. If you hang out with a smoker, you become a smoker. If you hang out with statists, you become a statist. So these are some books that I highly recommend if you're interested in learning more about this. Captains of Consciousness is a fantastic book that goes over how consumerism came to be and how advertising and marketing is used to shape identity, often to somewhat disastrous effects. And my favorite example from the book is how the American mother went from being an industrious, jack-of-all-trades, kick-ass, take-names person to being simply someone who buys stuff, and that's the role that they play in the family. And as a result, we see lots of women across the US and I'm sure around the world taking antidepressants because they have this lack of purpose, lack of meaning. And having a controlled narrative changes your perception of others, and we see that anytime you see war propaganda. And another unfortunate consequence of a centralization of culture is that local cultural institutions start to lose importance. And there's this great book called Bowling Alone that documents this fantastically. But most social institutions in the US, and I'm assuming the rest of the world, are either shrinking or not growing. And the ultimate impact from my perspective is when it impacts your health. And so we have, the stuff that we surround ourselves with and we consume impacts your health. And if their main goal is to sell you something and not necessarily to make you feel good about yourself or encourage you to have a healthy lifestyle, then that's going to lead to bad outcomes. So I'm sure you guys have heard this is attributed to Gandhi. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And that works in a lot of cases as a great way to think about kind of how to be an activist or revolutionary. But it really doesn't work in the broadcast space, and I'm going to tell you why. It needs to be the opposite. So it should be first you fight them. So MSM stands for mainstream media. Most people here probably don't really trust the mainstream media for lots of good reasons. You guys know how to do your own research. Good for you. And that's the first step, is realizing that the mainstream media, the centralized media structure is not really serving you. And then you laugh at them. Then you tell your friends, and that becomes a thing where, you're, maybe don't want to call it a circle jerk, but like it's like, oh yeah, the mainstream's so bad, and you have this whole alternative media structure that emerges, and its almost main goal is to drive home this point that the mainstream media is bad. And you see this in most memes that are like alt media related, is that they're not presenting their own narrative, but rather they're critiquing an existing narrative. And it gives power to that narrative, even if they're critiquing it. So we're not there yet. If you only fight them and if you only laugh at them, you really you're not succeeding in your goal of creating a freer society and a more educated society. So really the next thing is ignoring them. And that's where Badmirror TV comes into play. That's where, alternative media outlets really need to step up. And I'm really calling them out. So it's what's been missing, the ignoring them element. So I'm positing that there's this centralized narrative, and I think the way to combat it is to make thousands, if not tens of thousands, of local narratives, decentralized narratives, ones that are contextually relevant to where you live. And the way I plan on doing that is through a new broadcasting platform called Badmirror TV. And I think this quote really speaks to the power of what we're trying to accomplish. So earlier today, Thibaut asked me, Startup Society's Foundation, Thibaut asked me, like, how's this going to address the fake news issue? And the reality is that fake news is important not because of the facts, not because of the individual news story, but because when you add up all the news stories, it creates a narrative, it creates an expectation, it creates a context in which you're supposed to interact with the world. So it's not the one news story, because once you find one news story, you can easily disprove that. But if you're seeing fake news after fake news, and then the conversation becomes about the fake news, and even if you've educated yourself that it's a fake news story, but now that's what you're talking about, you only have so many hours in the day, and you're wasting your time. You're playing in their sandbox, and you're going to lose. So really, it's the medium is the message. And by decentralizing it and pushing it down lower into a lower node closer to you, where you actually can participate and the participants themselves, it makes for a situation where you are now more in control. You have a greater ability to not only say something, because that's fairly easy unless you're in like China where maybe there's more censorship. People can say stuff, but it's not about what you say. It's about how you're saying it and what tool you're using. So that's why I really love this quote. I find it very inspirational. So the solution, Badmirror TV, it's a personalized video broadcasting platform that connects you with your local and global community. And so what that looks like is we take videos, well actually our users take videos, we're a user-generated system, and they take videos that are uploaded already to Vimeo or YouTube, and instead of sharing it with friends and family like you would on a traditional social media website, we share it with a local community, a town, or a neighborhood of a city or a city. And what happens is the first people that get to see it, the only people that get to see it at first, are your local community, your neighbors. So, I want you to think about this in the era of crowdfunding. What better way to build a crowd than with your own local neighbors? And so it doesn't really matter how bad the content is. I mean, hopefully it's not bad, but really no matter what, you're guaranteed that you're going to have a local audience. And that's incredibly powerful, I think. Now, supposing the quality is good, the video quality is good, and the video gets upvotes, which ideally is the case, the video is going to graduate in geographical reach. So it'll go from being just seen locally to being seen at a county level, to being seen at a state level, regional level, national level, international level. And so we have basically a user-generated crowdsourced curation model. So where we're at right now with Badmirror TV is that this past year, we've had a beta version of the website, and we validated that we've created a product that people like to use. People are watching at 45 minutes at a pop, which we found very exciting, especially given that the website is incredibly confusing as we structured it and had really poor branding and just didn't really make that much sense. It wasn't intuitive. So despite that, we were having people watching 45 minutes at a pop. We took all that information from this past year of having a product out, and we're about to release a new version of the website that will be global. This original one was only available in 6 states in the US. So we're going to have this new website that'll be global. There's going to be a process by which new cities and new countries start broadcasting. And I have a couple asks, but before I give some more information about the company itself, we are an independent media company. We don't have any outside investors, and right now we're pretty proud of that. We think it's going to allow us to not be corrupted or swayed and not, move away from our mission. So the ask, follow us. We're on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. You have all these stickers on the tables that I put. Please take those. I don't want to take them back to New York. And most importantly, we're all doing something that I find incredibly inspirational. You're all working on amazing projects. You know people working on amazing projects, and they're in silos. They're isolated, and we can find out about them if we know the proper keywords or if we know the friends who are doing it. But that's not enough. We really need to take this into the mainstream, and Badmirror TV is one tool that I really hope you guys consider using to do that. It's going to help you find local people who are going to get involved with your projects, will be the first users, can be your advocates. But more importantly, it's going to allow you to create an environment in which you're going to want to live. It's about creating we're trying to create the future here, and what better place than in your own town? So I started with that Gandhi attributed quote, and this one I think is a little bit better. I came up with it. It's unsaid becomes unthought, becomes unthinkable. Unclear becomes understood, becomes unbelievable. And I think you all are doing unbelievable work, and I can't wait to see it on Badmirror TV. Thank you.